when he was here, he did an excellent job off the ice on standing. He was one of the most respected reporters that would come in. He was very honest and wrote the story very sincerely. And the players had so much respect for him as a writer and a person. I'm very happy he's going to the Hall of Fame. A little while later, I was working with Neil Brown as his assistant now with the Adirondack Red Wings, and Mike would still come around, and the same thing would happen at the coach's door. The door would open, 5 or 6 guys would come in, they'd get their stories, and then they'd all race out to go to the players' room, I guess. And Mike would sometimes do, it's a great little play for a reporter, he'd do a little loop around, and he'd ask Newell one more question, because he always wanted to get something extra that the other guys didn't. And that was a good little play for a reporter. So I just want to give Mike a little reward here as well. More rewards. I didn't realize this was in the budget. We found an old Red Wing puck for him, and I know he doesn't probably use pens anymore for writing. It's probably all on the computer, but he's going to give this to him. He's old school. And I think he only mentioned me once in his book, so I'm going to get him to sign my book again so I get twice.
I think I remember that. Only once in the book? How could that be?
I only read 20 pages.
You only read 20 pages? You don't have to worry about it. Mike, why is hockey so special here at Glens Falls?
Well, there's a guy named Ned Harkness who's long gone now who came in here and sold the idea of this would be a great experience here in Glens Falls. And sold it as a recreational or as a social activity and sold the sport part of it because there was no hockey going on here in 1977, 78 in Glens Falls. They played hockey outside in a box out at Crandall Park, and that was that. But he came in here, and Dave Strader, and Doug Burge, and Dave Casey, and that whole crew of people that came in the beginning went out and sold the idea, and it worked. It worked. 43 years later, here we are. There's been, I was thinking about this, people who came to see hockey games at Glens Falls Civic Center since 1979. I don't know, in that second year, they averaged 5,100 people per game in a building that seats 4,104 seats. So, you know, they surpassed capacity 11 times in 12 years, the first 12 years that they were here as an average tenant. So it got sold and people bought into it, and Harkness wanting to call this Hockey Town USA, I guess he did his job.
The fact that you've gone on since hockey and an award-winning writer as well too, you work for hockey, but also covering horse racing. I mean, you have the best of both worlds here, didn't you?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes. I covered a little hockey up in college in Potsdam. Dave Taylor was playing for Clarkson College at the time. He was a man among boys in the ECAC in those days, and Clarkson was a fun team to cover. I came down here and I was interested in hockey, but not a big fan, and then the hockey team came to me. And I knew I was going to be I was the sports editor. I was 26 years old. I knew who was going to cover the hockey team, and I took a job at the Schenectady Gazette that summer, realizing that was a better career move, and yeah, I got to cover hockey and did it for the whole 20 years the team was here. I covered at least one game. In the first 11 years, I covered every game. But with the horse racing, I realized around 1980, if I was going to stay in this market, I better learn something about horse racing. I didn't know what a maiden was. I really didn't know anything. I didn't know that a filly became a mare when she turned 5 years old. Didn't know any of that stuff, but learned it as I learned hockey, and it's been quite a good ride for me as well. So hockey and horse racing is a very nice combination. I never, rarely, for a long time, lost for words. even at emotional events like this. Many years ago, my friend Tim Wilkin handed me one of his racehorse-connected nicknames, Talking Man. A horse who ran in the 1995 Kentucky Derby. Coincidentally, that was the first time I covered the Derby. The nickname fit then, and it still does. But make no mistake about it, even though I have known for months that this day would come, it's still an exciting, delightful experience to be honored like this in my hometown, in the well-named Heritage Hall. A high point of my life for sure. So thank you, people who voted, people in the nominating committee, and thank you, people of Glens Falls and the region for embracing hockey all these years ago, and here we are, 43 years later. It's great. Good for you. Good for Glens Falls. I'm humbled to be saluted for working hard, perhaps obsessively, covering hockey in this region, especially the Red Wings. It's just turned out to be something that I couldn't have imagined back then that it would have gone on as long as it did, but it did, and it was a great ride. In order to find success that I did have during those years, I had the support of some very important people. At the very top of the list is my wife, Kathy, who has managed to endure decades of marriage to a slow-writing sports writer who worked far too many nights and weekends. Remarkably, we managed to schedule our marriage during the summer because back then I had to be free to cover high school sports after Labor Day. Since 1990, vacations have always come before or after the Saratoga racing season. And during those Adirondack years, before and after our daughters Darcy and Caitlin arrived, Saturday night often meant covering a game at the Civic Center. In many ways, covering the Red Wings turned into a family venture. My parents served in Maine, lived in Queensbury, and were season ticket holder subscribers from day one, even though they certainly were not hockey fans when the team arrived, which is the point that I was making before. Harkins came in and just was a blitzkrieg. They sold the idea that this would be fun. And let's face it, in 1978, what were people doing in downtown in Glens Falls on a Saturday night? There was not a lot going on. You had to get in the car and drive somewhere else. All of a sudden, bingo, there's a hockey team playing here, and it was exciting, and a lot of your neighbors and friends were going to it, so that worked. My parents children were all out of the house by that point, and I said to them, what are you going to do? Why don't you go get involved with this hockey team? And they did. And rather than stay home on Saturday nights, my wife often came to hockey games. She doesn't know anything about hockey. She's a great little hockey sports writer for more than 40 years, and she's successfully managed to kind of stay away from the heavy-duty sports part of it. That was great. And when Darcy and Kate were old enough, they came to these games too. We listened to Dave Strader on the radio on the games that we weren't at. I felt I had to keep track of what was going on when they were on the road, and so my family and children listened to Dave Strader many a night in those early years. I started out in the newspaper business in a weekly, and I got fortunate after about a year and a half, I got to come back to Glens Falls and got a job in the two-man sports department at the Post-Star in 1976. And the team was, there was talk about building the building here and all that, but I really wasn't paying attention to that. I was a 24-year-old, 25-year-old sports writer covering high school football and doing that stuff and kind of having fun at it. And then in 1978, Dan Amon got tipped off by Mayor Bartholomew that there was a hockey team coming to town. Bartholomew had made a good decision to hire Ned Harkness as the manager of this building. And while I had plenty of trouble with Ned, and I was banned from this building briefly, you got to give the guy credit. He sold the idea of this, and it became a huge success. Right from the rip, it was a popular thing, and it changed the sports business in the Capital District. After 20 plus years of no pro sports in the market, suddenly there was a team in Glens Falls, and people from Albany, Schenectady, Scotia, all these places were driving up here to go to the games, and it became a happening event, and it was, coincidentally, the team ended up being pretty good. That second year, winning the championship was perfect timing for Ned and his band of cohorts that were working in this building to be able to promote the team. I have to say, in that 1978, when we wrote the story, we were so afraid that Harkness was going to tell somebody in the Capital District media that that this team was going to be coming in here. We thought, oh, he's going to tell Bob McNamara, who was kind of the big TV guy in the marketplace at that time. We were sure. So we just went out of our way in our little, the group here at the Post-Star and managed to get the story. And Harkness was screaming at us on the phone. He called the publisher. He tried to get the story stopped. It didn't get stopped. And we had our little scoop back in our hometown and didn't have to worry about having it done on us on television. So I think that one of the most important things that happened here, getting the series, the title was an important thing in 81. But when Detroit hired Bill Dineen in 1983, I really think that was a kind of a watershed moment for the franchise. We had a bunch of coaches. Harkness was, he was making it hard on the coaches that were here. There were a couple of guys got fired, and there was changes. Bill comes in 1983, and jokingly, I think, said he'd like to stay 10 years. Well, he never left. He and his wife, Pat, moved here. They lived here for the rest of their lives. 5, I think, of his children still own houses here. And I think when Bill came in and the community really embraced the Dineen family, and that was really an important part of the time here. And it felt like our guy, our coach, our team. And Bill was just this interesting, funny, sometimes you never believe what things that would come out of his mouth, but people liked him, and people believed in him, and he knew what he was doing. He got a lot of good players, older AHL players to come here. Won in 86, which you were a member of. 3 years later, they won again in 89 after going down 3-0 to Hershey in the semifinals of the playoffs. No team comes back from down 3-0. And just to make it a little more difficult, Bill benched Murray East in Game 4 in Hershey. And in my book, I kind of figure on how Murray East was sitting in the top row at Hershey Park Arena while this team was trying to stave off elimination. And they did, and they won. This long rest of my speech, I'm going to skip past here.
We do have a game tonight.
In 1993, Betty Stengel, who lived here in Glens Falls and his brother ran a publishing company, asked me to write a book. And I, of course, said yes, and I did it, and which is just been signed for Joe. That was an interesting adventure for me as a newspaper guy to write a history of the team, and I'm forever grateful for those guys that gave me out. I continued to cover games through the 90s, and I was here I covered their next to last game, not their last game as it turned out. I was sorry to see them go. Hockey and the Red Wings were a very important and dear chapter in my life, personally and professionally. It's a great honor to join the Adirondack Hockey Hall of Fame. I salute the other inductees tonight, and I thank my family and friends for being here tonight. Thank you.